welcome to Made from Humans, How Reality Becomes TV. I'm your host, Andy Dennert, the creator of Reality Blurred, and a writer who believes in the power of true stories. Every week I'll take you behind the scenes of reality TV and my writing about it. On today's show, America's Culinary Cup and Padma Lakshmi's dream of shaking up the cooking competition genre. Did it work? And how did it come together? I have some insights from her and the show's showrunner to share with you. I also have reality TV recommendations for you, and if you stick around to the very end of the episode, you will hear life advice from reality TV, this time from Padma herself. Welcome to Season 5. It's so good to be with you after that month-long, or maybe 5-week-long break. As you may have noticed if you were here for Season 4, there's a new name for this podcast. It is now Made from Humans, How Reality Becomes TV, instead of just Andy Dennert's Reality Blurred. The reason for the change is pretty simple. When I took the show from Season 1 to Season 2, which if you may remember if you're here all the way back then, Season 1 was me walking around my neighborhood on my afternoon walks and just talking into my iPhone, recording it, and then uploading that voice memo with my newsletter as basically an episode. I decided to move it inside, use an actual microphone, and also save you all of my panting from me walking at my gay pace around my neighborhood. I didn't have an idea for a new title or show name at that time, and I also was hoping that people would be able to find me and or Reality Blurred if they were searching up for podcasts. And so I just named it Andy Dennert's Reality Blurred, which, feels a little narcissistic there, but I was the best I had. But in the spirit of constantly evolving, changing, and learning, which is what I've done for almost 26 years now, publishing Reality Blurred, I've decided that it's time to give it a name that actually reflects its content. I'm excited just to take the steps into this next chapter. I think you're also going to see some changes based upon the fact that I am currently part of a cohort of independent podcasters who make up the New Voices Amplify group in 2026. This is from AIR, or the Association of Independents in Radio, and we were chosen earlier this spring to come together to learn about marketing and audience development and other things from independent podcasters and from the people in AIR. And I'm very excited to learn from my fellow cohort. I will link in the show notes or the episode description of your podcast app to the list of everyone so you can discover some new great podcasts as I have, for those that you may not have heard of. And I'm excited to learn from this program, and so I hope you will see some of those changes coming in the weeks ahead as I learn more. Let's go on to the actual content today, and we're going to start with a brand new department. It is time for Curtain Pull, in which I take a quick peek behind the scenes of a show. Today, that's Food Network's 24 and 24 Last Chef Standing. It airs on Sunday nights. It's a competition that actually takes place over 24 hours. I guess a little bonus curtain pull tip here. My goal here is just to kind of share one thing and get out of this department really fast so I don't ramble too much. But here we go, taking a tangent already. It's filmed over 24 hours, and it's kind of amazing that you can get an entire season of television in 24 hours. Obviously, they have to do a few crew shift changes during that time, but what a way to save money. And in this industry economy right now, that is increasingly important. Anyway, the curtain pull tidbit I have for you is that 24 and 24 Last Chef Standing is actually filmed in an IKEA. It's, a former IKEA, but it's one in Burbank. And you can actually tell that because behind the judges, through the glass windows, you can see these kind of vertical metal grids. And those are actually the self-service area or storage area for all of the IKEA products that used to be in there. This is actually a studio in Burbank, California now, and unlike other shows that have kind of fake B-roll shots of exteriors of, where they're actually shooting, they actually show you the exterior of this IKEA, which no longer, of course, has the IKEA sign on it, but again, is a studio. I will drop a link to a map in the show notes so you can check that out if you like to stalk filming locations. This is also the same IKEA that's hosted other shows such as Floor is Lava and Tournament of Champions in Season 1, I think maybe Season 2 also, but Tournament of Champions eventually moved all the way up to Northern California to be filmed in the same studio with Guy Fieri's other shows. So anyway, look for the IKEA remnants the next time you watch 24 and 24. Okay, let's go on to foundational facts, a new department where I talk about how shows got their start. And today, it's a brand new show, America's Culinary Cup on CBS. It follows Survivor on Wednesdays. The finale for the first season airs on May 13th, a Wednesday, so by the time you hear this, it may already be out. No spoilers for the season or for the finale, I promise, if you haven't seen any of it coming here, except just a little discussion of some challenges, but nothing about the results or eliminations or anything, I promise. What's so interesting about the show is that it is entering a very populated space. Obviously, Top Chef has been around for years and years from 2004. Although Padma did not host season one of that show, that's basically been her show since season two, and that's where we've known her from. So when she left at the end of season 20 to work on Taste the Nation for Hulu, which eventually got canceled, unfortunately, she decided to create her own show in that Top Chef space. And of course, Food Network is nothing but competitions now. Other networks have their own, although other networks have really struggled to get traction in the food space, except for Fox with MasterChef, obviously Hell's Kitchen, now Next Level Chef. Earlier this year, at a Television Critics Association press conference, Padma told us, and here's a quote, "I thought that the genre was ready for a shakeup, for a refresh, and for something new and different." And she said, quote, "When you are making a show from scratch, you get to do things differently from all of your experience. You get to bring the team that you've always wanted to work with. And I think all of that were really big factors in me coming back to the genre." So I love this because, yes, I think shows and formats that are kind of getting a little stale can definitely use shakeups. And I think all these shows, for me, are interesting and fun to write about, fun to watch, because you get to see people doing craft at a very high level. Of course, Project Runway kicked this off, and then Top Chef came in, and then there were a bunch of other shows. There was, remember, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the Tabitha Coffee show that was on Bravo, where she was a stylist and they were cutting hair. And I know it's some kind of pun. Bravo hair cutting competition. I'm just searching DuckDuckGo right now. Sheer Genius. I can't believe I forgot that. And unfortunately, those have kind of all thinned back, and mostly what we get now are cooking competitions. Still love the genre, still probably eat way too many snacks when I watch them. But I'm always excited to see somebody take what they've learned and do something with it. Something I hear a lot from showrunners when I talk to them, especially at the start of a season 2 or even season 3, is how much they've learned from season 1. And that's not just from the way audience members react, or of course, what the network has to say or what the notes the streamer has for them in terms of what they want to be changed, but just the act of actually producing the show. You learn a lot that you might change in the future. It's not going to always be perfect on the first try. That's certainly true for my writing. Sometimes I'll put out a first draft and I'll notice those errors or things I change later. Sometimes I work on a draft for years and I still see things I want to change. See my memoir in progress, which is still in progress, and I really need to just finally finish that second draft because it is so close and I just can't stop revising because I want to make it perfect, and that's impossible, but that's another story. So back to America's Culinary Cup. The idea behind the show is that it brings in a bunch of elite chefs to cook in a very high level. So there are people who've won Michelin stars and other kinds of accolades, James Beard Awards, etc., or been nominated for those. So this isn't a home cook competition, for example. The set really reflects that. It's this beautiful, open, bright space with what maybe looks like marble countertops. There's this huge arc of a window with floor to ceiling, but multiple story ceiling windows that looks out over the New York City skyline. Fun fact, that's not the New York City skyline because this was filmed in a studio warehouse in Toronto. So that's just a backdrop. The magic of television has made us think we were in New York and put that footage together with the introduction of the host getting off a helicopter in New York City. And we think that they're actually there. Before the show came out, besides what Padma had talked about with TV critics, she also talked about the show in a really fun interview with Interview Magazine, in which she said that it had, and I quote, no fucking format, which is amazing because formatted shows are pretty much all competition shows. You have a kind of structure, it's challenge, elimination or challenge elimination. Top Chef is obviously quick fire elimination challenge, actual elimination after the judging. Of course, sometimes shows play with that a little bit, but it's a defined format episode to episode. So I was like, how are they going to do that for a competition? And when I watched the first episode of the show, I don't think I was disappointed so much as I was surprised at how familiar it felt. It felt very much like Top Chef, elevated in some ways, changed a little bit in other ways, but not something that was totally surprising me and coming from, way outside of the norms of what this genre of cooking competitions does typically. And that comparison, I think, is probably unfair but it's also inevitable. That's where, you have the host of Top Chef come to host this show and create the show. Of course, there's going to be a comparison between the two. But I think I came to appreciate parts of it more in terms of the way that things played out. Some of it, there's a mix of kind of social competition strategy stuff that I was a little bit surprised by, considering the kind of elite level. But at the same time, it also avoids a lot of the stuff that Top Chef does that I can't stand. Like, they don't have to all race up to a table and fight each other for ingredients. I mean, that's not what Top Chefs do. Just give them all the produce that they want. Or if you want it to be random, just have them draw names or knives or whatever. It's just the kind of stuff that just feels unnecessary, and Bravo kind of like creating some drama where there doesn't have to be any. Last week, I interviewed the showrunner of America's Culinary Cup, Josh Silverman, who comes from other shows that I've really liked, including the Double Dare reboot for Nickelodeon, which really kept the spirit of the 1980s original with Mark Summers that I fell in love with. It was probably my first competition show, to be honest. Also, the Press Your Luck, the game show with Elizabeth Banks, who's an amazing host. If you haven't seen that, it's, I think, the best of these kind of rebooted game shows or, classic game shows come back. Anyway, Josh told me that when he was brought on board to create the show, they knew that it was going to be following Survivor. And they knew, of course, that CBS has an audience that's looking for a kind of competition. And so that's why they brought him in, because he doesn't have a lot of experience with food shows and admits that in the interview, which will be up on Reality Blurred on Wednesday. Basically, he's talking about the fact that he's bringing a different skill set to the table. He also hired co-executive producers who came from culinary shows, so he had that experience on the team as well. I'm going to play a little bit of the interview for you right now, where he talks about devising one of the challenges that he calls the show's signature challenge, and I think that's probably right if it comes back for a second season, and I hope it does, if only because I think it's, again, always interesting to see how shows continue to evolve and bring themselves to the next level. So here you're going to hear Josh talk to me about one challenge, which comes from episode 7, which is titled The Gastronomic Gauntlet, and how it was conceived.
Oftentimes, these chefs on cooking shows, you see them make like 1 or 2 dishes, and that's cool. And they thought about these dishes, and they spent a lot of time thinking about these dishes. And the chefs, generally speaking, are very particular and type A about their dishes because they're the best, and they should be. And I wanted to like get past thinking and seeing how many dishes they can make in 5 hours. Well, I originally pitched it as 12 hours, and then Padma was like, that's crazy. And all of the challenge team was like, that's crazy. They could never eat that much. They were like 4 hours. And I was like 8 hours. And they're like, no. And then I was like 5 hours. And so we settled at 5 hours, which honestly probably still was too much, but still was great. But they ate 40 dishes, and I don't even know how they stood after that challenge. But what we got to see from the chefs is a lot of different dishes, a lot of different styles of dishes they made. And what we got to see, which was so interesting, is they weren't thinking, they were just cooking on instincts. And it was so fun to watch them put stuff together without like a lot of forethought. And that was something that felt like an iconic challenge for our show, and something I've never seen anybody else do.
That's fascinating to me to hear about the kind of push and pull that happens behind the scenes. So I might watch that, you might watch that, we might watch it together and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're cooking for just 5 hours. Why didn't they make it longer? And we realized that they actually talked about that and tried to figure it out. Or it might be like, that's way too much. Why didn't they pull back? And they had those conversations and they settled on something, and you ultimately make a choice and go with it. It's also interesting to hear how there's an idea behind it. It's not just let's throw them into the fire, so to speak. But it's let's see what happens when they just are cooking and can't plan, can't overthink, can't prep. There's something there that I haven't seen before either. And I loved hearing Josh talk about how that was part of the creative process in creating that particular challenge. And the creative process continues not just in planning and then, of course, in actual production, filming, the way things are shot. And you'll hear Josh talk about that in just a moment, but also then in the editing of it, like how much do we see? How is it cut together? And during all of this, there's multiple people who have input, the network has input, and things get changed around or modified. So there's all kinds of versions of this that could take place. But I asked Josh about how they decide like how much cooking to show on a show that obviously has a limited amount of time. So here's me asking him about that and his answer during our conversation. So you mentioned earlier, and I appreciated saying sort of that the cooking is ultimately what matters. And I think we've seen that in a lot of the challenges, which I've enjoyed, and for that kind of purity that they have. I'm curious about the editing piece of that, because sometimes the editing doesn't give us a lot of the cooking time. And how do you calibrate kind of like, this is the time where I actually show them conceiving versus cooking versus judging versus flipboard stuff like in the final edit?
Yeah. I mean, if it was up to me, it'd be split flatboard all the time. I'm obsessed with that thing. I love it. No, I'm joking. I think that's like the toughest thing you can do with any cooking show is because you want to show the process and how it's made. And you want to give the dish its due, and you want to give the chefs their due. So what we really try to do is show a little bit of everything if we can. And then we do is, and our director Ari did such a great job at making this it stylized and making it really interesting. Because listen, cutting onions is not very exciting, but seeing it in high speed and like a really cool Ronin camera move, and he had Ronins like floating all around stage, brings something new and exciting to it, and like some high speed cinematography. So you get to see something in a way you haven't seen it. It's really, if it's important to the story, it's always going to be there. And then on top of that, we just try to show a little element of everything they do, so you don't miss it.
I love knowing that they think about cutting onions as boring TV. So how do we make that visually interesting with camera moves, with slow motion? And then the idea of just making sure we see a little piece of each part of what they're doing so that it comes together as a story. So those are just some examples of how this show created some foundational elements, really piece things together from the ground up to build something new. And whether it's a rating smash or a creative success or something that people are obsessed with and watch as much and talk about as Top Chef, ultimately that comes down to a combination of how that foundation was built upon. Okay, on to recommendations, where I share things that are bringing joy and entertainment into my life. First up, Couples Therapy seasons 1 through 4 are streaming on Paramount Plus. I've been rewatching them in preparation for some coverage that I'm doing for season 5. You're getting to sit in a therapist's office with people and hear them talk to a real therapist. And there's so much that I learned from it. And it is also just so intensely riveting. Next is The Comeback. The Comeback just finished season 3, which Lisa Kudrow has said is the final season of the show, which is on HBO. I hope that's not the case. I hope we get another season, if only because season 3 probably wasn't my favorite of them and kind of leaves us in a little bit of a slightly less great place than before. So I'd love to see her revisit it. And mostly I'd love to see the character back. Like that's the real win of The Comeback, is Lisa Kudrow and her performance as Valerie Cherish. Season 1 of The Comeback is Lisa Kudrow playing Valerie Cherish, a former sitcom star who is hired onto a new sitcom and also is making a reality TV show about that sitcom. And so the whole conceit is that we're watching the footage filmed for the reality TV show. And that premiered more than 20 years ago. So there's a lot of early reality TV anxiety and ethics and all kinds of interesting stuff in that first season. And season 2 does something completely different and is also really fascinating as well. Just don't miss it for Lisa Kudrow's performance, but at the very least, season 1 is worth checking out for the reality TV of it all. And I rewatched that too. It holds up perfectly. It is absolutely a gem and not to be missed. And finally this week, I'm going to recommend an episode of Extra Hot Great, the podcast about TV. In this episode, 3 people pitched different shows to be included into the Extra Hot Great canon of all-time great episodes of TV shows. Actually, one of those is a pitch for the no-knack canon, spelled backwards, meaning the worst episode of an otherwise good show. And that pitch is about the Great British Bake Off's Mexican Week episode, which, if you watch the Great American, why do we keep calling it the Great American? The Great British Bake Off, you know, was one of its biggest disasters, if only because Paul Hollywood alleges to have just visited Mexico and spends the whole episode talking about tacos. And then they confuse a taco. Sorry, I said it that way again. They confuse a taco for a tortilla, which is the only baking that happens in the taco challenge. And like the taco isn't the tortilla or the shell. And the fact that no one knows that is just the start of how bad that episode is. And then pile on all the stereotypes. Anyway, that's not my recommendation, but it's a great third of that episode. So this episode is good for more than just the part I'm about to tell you about, which is Dan Casino's pitch for an episode of Iron Chef to go into the canon. The reason I'm mentioning it is because of Dan Casino's pitch for Iron Chef to be included in the canon. Iron Chef was the original cooking competition and kind of gave us everything that has followed from it. And Dan's pitch is so interesting because it really helped me understand my, freak out, I guess, when I found out a lot about how Iron Chef was made. Basically, sometime in the 2000s, and I'll link to this piece if you want to see it, I read a magazine article or something that went behind the scenes and basically pointed out that when the chefs arrive, they know what the secret ingredient is going to be. They've been given a list of possible secret ingredients, and they've picked stuff that they would need for each of those. And they show up and they're like, oh, look, that's what they bought us. Now we know what the secret ingredient is. So it's not a surprise, for one. And for two, like the food that they make is not actually presented to the judges right away. It's like remade later. And so I don't understand how that works. Anyway, Dan makes a really good point that this is actually a show that's about style more than substance. I was looking at it as, the Olympics. And he makes the case for it being wrestling, and it's a really fascinating argument, so give that a listen. Okay, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for listening today to this episode, and feel free to send me your feedback, questions, and thoughts. If you're in a 5-star mood, tap those in your podcast app of choice. Your ratings and reviews really do help me out. Our theme song is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. And this episode is by me, Andy Dennert, and is copyright 2026 by Reality Blurred LLC, which is also me. You can find me at realityblurred.com and andydennert.com. I'll leave you today with life advice from reality TV, this time from Padma Lakshmi on America's Culinary Cup, with some advice to the chefs that actually applies to all of us these days.
So get some rest. Good night.